The first week, the silence had a shape to it. That's the only way I know how to explain it to people who've never done a fire season alone. You expect the quiet. Everybody warns you about the quiet. What nobody tells you is that after a few days, it stops being an absence and starts being a thing, a presence with edges, and you find yourself moving through it carefully, the way you'd move through a dark room you knew well but didn't trust. My name doesn't matter much for this. What matters is that I spent 3 summers working fire lookouts for a state forestry program in the mountains, and the last of those summers I was assigned to a station I'll call North Ridge. I'm changing some of the names and some of the geography on purpose, partly because I signed paperwork, mostly because I don't want anyone going up there to check. North Ridge was an old tower, the kind they don't build anymore. 14 feet of timber legs holding a glass box, maybe 16 by 16, at the top of a long, bald spine of rock. You could see almost 90 miles on a clear day. On the days the smoke came in from the western fires, you couldn't see your own truck at the bottom of the access road. The job was simple, and it was the whole reason the place existed. You watched. You logged smoke. You called it in. The rest of the time, the mountain just had you, and you had it, and the two of you waited. I want to be honest that I liked it. I'd liked it the 2 summers before, at easier stations closer to the ranger district, where you'd get hikers wandering up to ask for water, and the radio chatter was constant and friendly. North Ridge was the deep posting, the one they gave you when they trusted you to be alone. I'd asked for it. I want that on the record, because later I spent a long time wondering why I'd wanted it, and I never found a good answer. The setup was this. I had the cab at the top, with the firefinder in the center, a brass and glass instrument bolted to a map of the whole district, calibrated so that when you sighted a smoke through it, you could read off the bearing in the rough distance and phone it in. I had a propane stove, a cot, a weather kit, a logbook, and I had the radio. The radio mattered. We had cell coverage exactly nowhere, so the handheld and the base set in the cab were how I talked to the dispatch office 40 miles east, how I checked in, how I'd call for help if a fire jumped or if I broke a leg coming down the stairs. There was a schedule to it. I'd key up at 0800 for the morning check, give my name, my station, the weather readings, the visibility. Dispatch would copy and we'd both go about our day. I'd check again at noon and again at 1800 before the light went. 3 times a day, a human voice. You learn to need it more than you'd admit. The dispatcher on my shifts was a woman named Carol, late 50s, dry sense of humor, a smoker's rasp. She'd worked that desk for 22 years, and she knew every lookout in the district by the sound of their voice. The first morning I keyed up, she said, "North Ridge, that you or did somebody finally fix the static up there?" And I knew right away we'd get along. So that's the world. A glass box, a brass instrument, a logbook, and a voice 40 miles east who knew my name. Hold on to that. The voice 40 miles east who knew my name. The first 3 weeks were uneventful in the way the job is supposed to be uneventful. I logged 2 real smokes, both of them legitimate, both of them already known to dispatch by the time I called, which is normal. Somebody usually sees a fire from a road before a lookout does. I got my routines down. Coffee at first light. Sweep the horizon with the binoculars, quadrant by quadrant, clockwise, the way they teach you. Log the weather, morning check-in. Read in the heat of the afternoon when the light was too flat to see smoke well anyway. Evening sweep, evening check-in, then the long slide into dark and the mountain and the quiet with its shape. The wrong thing when it started was so small that I want you to understand I didn't even register it as wrong. I registered it as a relief. It was a Thursday, late June, my 24th day up. I did my evening check-in at 1800, keyed up the base set, gave Carol the weather, told her visibility was good, told her I had eyes on a controlled burn way down in the southeast that the district had warned me about so I wouldn't call it in as new. Then I closed out the way you always close out. Asked her to confirm my line was clear for the night, which is just the phrase. Just the thing you say to put the day to bed, the radio equivalent of good night. She copied. She said, "Clear for the night, North Ridge. Get some rest." We signed off. Normal. The channel went quiet, and quiet on that channel meant closed. Carol's shift didn't end until 2200, but she wouldn't key up again unless there was a fire. And there wasn't going to be a fire. So as far as I was concerned, the day's radio was finished. I set the handset in its cradle and I made my coffee and I read. Then about 40 minutes later, with the light going amber and long across the glass, the base set crackled and a voice said, "Copy, North Ridge, lines clear for the night." I looked up from my book. It took me a second, and I want to be honest about what that second contained, because it matters. My first reaction wasn't fear. It was a kind of dim, administrative confusion. The feeling you get when someone answers a question you asked so long ago you'd forgotten asking it. Because that was my phrase. Lines clear for the night. That was the thing I'd said to Carol 40 minutes earlier, and she'd already answered it, and now the radio was answering it again, late, like an echo that had taken the long way around the mountain. I picked up the handset and I said, "Say again." And the voice said, the same flat calm, "Lines clear. You're good for the night." "Carol?" I said. Nothing. The channel sat there with that soft live hiss it has when it's open, and someone's on the other end not talking. I waited. Then I said, "Dispatch, this is North Ridge. You copy?" And I gave it a 10 count, and nothing came back at all, not even the hiss, just the dead air of a closed channel. I want to sit on that moment because everything turns on it. I assumed it was Carol. Or I didn't even assume, I just didn't let myself think about it. Carol had keyed up late, that was all. Some loose end at the desk she'd meant to button up and gotten distracted from, and she'd come back on to close it out properly. The voice hadn't sounded like Carol. It was a man's voice, middle register, calm, a little flattened the way radio flattens everyone. But I told myself the relay tower did strange things to a signal. And besides, dispatch wasn't only Carol. There were other people who passed through that office. A tired brain at the end of a long, solitary day will hand you any explanation that lets it stop thinking. So I set the handset down. I went back to my book, and I read another 2 chapters and went to sleep. Here is the thing I only worked out days later, lying on the cot at 3 in the morning with my eyes open. Dispatch doesn't answer a sign-off. There's nothing to answer. Lines clear for the night is the end of the conversation, not the middle of it. You don't confirm a confirmation. In 22 years, Carol had never once keyed back up to repeat something we'd already closed. And she certainly hadn't done it 40 minutes later, off schedule on a dead channel, in a man's voice, only to go silent the instant I asked who it was. The first answer wasn't friendly. It was impossible in a small, quiet, easily missed way. But it arrived wearing the exact words I'd used myself, in the exact cadence of the job, and at the time alone for 24 days. I let it in because it sounded like the channel hadn't closed on me after all, because it sounded like I wasn't done talking to someone for the night. The next night it happened again. Same window, roughly. I did my 1800 check-in, weather and visibility, signed off with Carol, set the handset down. The channel closed, the good light went, the amber turning to grey, and about 40 minutes on, the radio crackled and the voice said, "Copy, North Ridge, weather holding for you up there." This time I noticed, not because anything was frightening. The voice was perfectly ordinary, a man's voice, middle register, calm, a little flat the way radio flattens everyone. I noticed because I'd had a whole day to sit with the night before, and I'd half decided to ask Carol about it at the morning check, and I'd forgotten, and now here it was again answering me, picking up the thread of a conversation I'd already finished and closed. And my first clear thought was, that's not Carol, which is obvious. Carol's a woman. The voice was a man. But it was more than that. I keyed up and I said, "Who is this? Dispatch already signed me off." And the voice said, pleasant, patient, as if I hadn't spoken, "Weather holding?" And before I could stop myself, I said, "Holding fine, clear skies," because the reflex is the reflex. 24 days of training, and the job answers before you do. And the voice said, "Good, good, stay sharp," and went quiet, and the channel died. That same complete deadness, no hiss, nothing. The sound of a frequency with no one on it. You have to understand how radio works at a lookout. You hear a lot of voices. The channel isn't private. Other lookouts, other dispatchers, the occasional ranger truck, air assets during a fire. A man's voice on the radio wasn't strange in itself. What was strange once I let myself look at it was that this voice only ever came after the channel had closed. It never spoke during the working day. It never logged anything. Never passed information, never did any of the things radio traffic exists to do. It waited until Carol signed me off and the line went quiet, and then it answered me, by station. It picked up my own phrases, lines clear, weather holding, and handed them back to me, and it did it like someone who had been on the channel the whole time, listening, waiting for the official voice to leave so it could have the line to itself, so it could have me to itself. So at the morning check the next day, I asked Carol straight out. I said, "Hey, did you key back up to me last night after we signed off? Or the night before, around 1900? There was a pause. Not a long one. But on radio you learn to hear pauses because they're all you've got. After we signed off, she said. No, we closed out both nights, 1800, line clear, that was it. I didn't touch the set again. Why? Somebody's answering me, I said. After you sign me off, 40 minutes later, give or take, a man's voice, saying my line's clear, my weather's holding, saying my own stuff back to me. I figured it was you running late or somebody else at the desk. It's not the desk, Carol said. I'm the only one on it after 1600, and I'd remember calling you, hun. You're the only thing up there to talk to, and nobody answers a sign-off. There's nothing to answer. She'd said it light, but I could hear her thinking now, the way her voice slowed. Probably another lookout sitting on the channel, bored, screwing around once we go quiet for the night. We get like that. Tell whoever it is to stay off the line and let you sleep. Yeah, I said. Probably. And we left it there. And that explanation was good. That explanation was so good I held on to it for almost a week. Another lookout, bored, lonely, screwing around, answering me at night because hearing a human voice is the best entertainment on the mountain, and we all knew it. I'd have done it myself. I'd thought about it. There were 6 other deep stations in the district, 6 other people in glass boxes on top of mountains, and any one of them could have been the voice. So that night I decided to flush him out. After I'd signed off with Carol and the channel had gone quiet, I waited for the 40 minutes, and when the radio crackled, "Copy, North Ridge, you good for the night?" I keyed up fast and said, "Copy, who's this? You on Bald Knob? Sawtooth?" The voice said, "Just checking on you." I said, "Right, but which station? Who am I talking to?" And there was a pause, the same kind of pause, and then the voice said, "Same as you." I sat with the handset in my hand. Same as you. It could mean anything. It could mean I'm a lookout, same as you. It could mean I'm bored, same as you. It was the kind of thing you'd say if you were keeping a game going. I told myself that. "Same station as me?" I said. "Or same job?" "Same," the voice said. And then after a moment, in exactly the same flat, calm tone, "Stay sharp, long one ahead." And the channel went dead. I logged it. I want you to know I logged it because I'd started to feel like I should have a record. I wrote the time, 1906, and I wrote unscheduled radio contact, unidentified, answering after sign-off, claims to be lookout, and I underlined claims. Then I sat in the dark and I thought about it the way you think about a thing when you've got nothing else to think about for 14 hours a day. Here's what bothered me, and it took me a while to put it into words. A bored lookout messing with the channel wants you to know who he is. That's the whole fun of it. The joke only works if eventually you both laugh about it on the morning check. A bored lookout would have cracked by now, would have said gotcha, would have wanted the connection. This voice was doing the opposite. Every time I reached for who, it pulled back to checking on you. It wasn't trying to connect, it was trying to confirm something. And it never started a conversation, it only ever answered mine after the official voice was gone, like it needed me to speak first. Like it needed the line opened from my end before it could come through. It kept asking if my weather was holding, if my line was clear, if I was sharp, and at the time I thought those were just the noises radio people make, but laid end to end they read differently. They read like someone taking inventory, like someone checking the condition of a thing they were interested in. I decided to stop answering. That was my plan, and I felt good about it, the way you feel good about any plan that gives you back a little control. If it was a person playing a game, silence would bore him and he'd stop. If it was interference, some skip signal bouncing off the atmosphere from 100 miles away, then it didn't matter whether I answered or not. Either way, I'd just let it ring out into the dark and go back to my book. Don't feed it. Simple. The next night I signed off with Carol, set the handset in its cradle, and I sat at the table with the lamp on and I waited for 1900 to come and go. At 1904 it said, "Northridge, you copy?" I didn't move. "Northridge, you copy?" I kept my eyes on the book and I didn't read a word of it. There was a silence, maybe 30 seconds. And then the voice said, perfectly calm, "I can see your light on." I will tell you exactly what I did, because I've gone over it 1,000 times. I did not pick up the radio. I stood up and I turned off the lamp. It was full dark by then, that real mountain dark with the stars coming hard and white through the glass on all four sides. And I stood there in the middle of the cab with my heart going and I looked out at the black in every direction. There was nothing out there. There's never anything out there. The nearest road was 4 miles down. The nearest deep station, Bald Knob, was 11 miles across 2 drainages, and you could just see its light on a clear night if you knew exactly where to look, a single pinprick on the next ridge over. I looked for Bald Knob's light. I found it. A faint, steady speck to the northwest. And I thought, okay, he can see my light because he's a lookout on another mountain, and lookouts can see each other's lights. That's the most normal thing in the world. That's almost reassuring. He's at Bald Knob. He's bored. He can see my window lit up at night and he's screwing with me. I almost laughed. I almost turned the lamp back on and keyed up and said, "Nice one, Bald Knob, you got me." Then the radio said, "There you go. Better in the dark, isn't it?" And the speck of light that was Bald Knob, 11 miles to the northwest, was still on. I want to be careful here, because this is where I know it starts to sound like I'm building something. But I'm telling you what I saw. Bald Knob's light was on, steady, the way it had been all night. The way a lookout's light is when the lookout is inside doing his own thing. If the voice was at Bald Knob, and the voice had just watched me turn my lamp off and approved of it, then either he was sitting in the dark watching me through binoculars across 11 miles while his own lamp burned behind him, which is possible, people do that, or the voice was not at Bald Knob. And if the voice was not at Bald Knob, and not at any of the other stations, all of which were further away, and most of which I couldn't even see, then I didn't have a comfortable place left to put him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the cot with the radio off. I'd switched it off entirely, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to keep it on in case of an emergency call. But I switched it off, and I watched the 4 walls of glass go from black to grey to the first thin blue of dawn. And when 0800 came, I switched the radio back on, and I keyed up, and I have never in my life been so glad to hear Carol's rasp come back at me, ordinary and bored and 40 miles east. I told her everything, the whole sequence, the same as you, the I can see your light, the lamp, Bald Knob. I tried to keep my voice even, and I don't think I managed it. Carol was quiet for a second, and then she said, "Okay. First thing, you did right switching the lamp off. That's instinct. But keep the radio on from now on, you hear me? Don't you ever switch that radio off again." And there was something in how she said it, an urgency under the calm, that scared me more than anything the voice had said. "Yeah," I said. "Okay." "Second thing," she said, "I'm going to check with the other stations this morning, every one of them, and I'm going to find out who's on the channel at night. There's a person doing this, and we're going to find him. People do strange things up there, hun. The isolation does it. Somebody's lonely, and they latched onto you. That's all this is. But it's not okay, and I'm going to stop it. You did right to tell me." That helped. That helped more than I can say. Because Carol had been doing this for 22 years, and Carol wasn't scared. Carol was annoyed, and annoyance is the most grounding emotion there is. You can't be annoyed at a ghost. Annoyance meant a person. A person could be found and told to knock it off. She called me back at the noon check with what she'd found, and what she'd found was good, mostly, and I held on to the good part for as long as I could. Every station had checked in. All 6 deep stations, plus the 2 closer ones, plus the relay tower. She'd talked to every single lookout in the district personally that morning and asked each of them point blank, "Are you keying up to Northridge at night?" And every one of them said no. And Carol believed them, and so did I. Because here was the thing, most of them hadn't even known there was a lookout at Northridge this season. It had been vacant the year before. Several of them said they'd assumed it was still empty. "So nobody's doing it," I said. "Somebody's doing it," Carol said. "It's just not one of mine. Could be a ham operator, some hobbyist with a radio who found our frequency and thinks it's funny. Could be a hunter, a poacher, somebody up there illegally with a handheld who likes to mess with the towers. The channel's not as private as people think. It's a person. We just don't know which person yet. And that was a real explanation. I want to be fair to it. A trespasser with a radio, somebody who shouldn't be on the mountain and knew it. Somebody who'd figured out the frequency and gotten his entertainment from answering the new lookout after dark that explained the I can see your light, that explained the evasiveness, that explained same as you, which could just be a guy who liked his little riddles. It explained everything except the way it felt, and feelings aren't evidence. I knew that. I'd built my whole personality up there on not being the kind of person who confused a feeling for evidence. So I made a decision, and Carol agreed with it. The next time the voice came, I'd engage, not to play his game, to gather information, to get him talking, to get him to slip, to find out where he was and who he was so dispatch could send someone. Carol said she'd have a ranger truck on standby for the next few nights, parked at the bottom of the access road, radio on, ready to move the second I had anything concrete. I wasn't alone anymore, that's what mattered. There was a truck at the bottom of the road with a person in it who knew my name. That night I signed off with Carol as usual, and I waited, and I kept the lamp on and the radio on, and at 19:02 it came. "North Ridge, you copy?" I picked up. My hand was steady. I'd decided it would be. "Copy, go ahead." "There you are," the voice said. "You went quiet on me last night." "I was asleep," I said. "No," the voice said, pleasant, certain. "You were sitting up, with the radio off." I kept my breathing slow. He couldn't know that. He could guess that. A person who'd spooked someone would guess they'd sat up scared. "Where are you?" I said. "Let's just talk straight. Where are you calling from?" "Same place as always." "Which is where?" "Here," the voice said. "Same as you." I'd promised myself I'd keep him talking, so I kept him talking. "You keep saying same as you. Same job? You a lookout?" "I watch," the voice said. "Same as you. I watch the ridge. I've watched it a long time." "From which station?" "From here." "There's no station near me," I said. "Closest tower is Bald Knob, 11 miles out. So where's here?" And the voice said in the same flat calm, with no change in tone whatsoever, "I'm not in a tower." I looked out the north window, then the east, then the south, then the west. Black glass, stars, the faint speck of Bald Knob to the northwest, nothing else. The mountain dropped away on all sides into drainages full of timber and rock, and 4 miles of nothing between me and the road. "Then where are you?" I said, and I heard my own voice thin out. "Lower," the voice said. "I'm lower than you. I'm under the light." I have tried for years to describe the specific quality of fear in that moment, and I keep failing, so I'll just tell you what it did, and it made me look down. The cab sits at the top of 14 feet of timber legs, and below the cab is the catwalk. And below the catwalk is the long stairway zigzagging down to the rock. And below that is the bald spine of the mountain. Under the light, the cab light, when it was on, threw a pool of weak yellow down onto the catwalk and the top of the stairs, and faded out into the dark before it reached the ground. Under the light was the catwalk. Under the light was the top of the stairs, 8 feet from where I was standing, on the other side of a glass door. The lamp was on. I'd left it on because Carol said keep the radio on, and I'd kept everything on. The cab was a lit box in an ocean of dark, and I was standing in the middle of it, where anything outside could see me perfectly, and I could see nothing outside at all. I keyed the radio with a hand that was no longer steady, and I didn't say anything to the voice. I switched to the ranger channel and I said, "Truck, this is North Ridge. You copy? I need you to come up. I need you to come up now." The ranger came back instantly, a man named Devon, young, steady. "Copy North Ridge, what have you got?" "He says he's on my catwalk," I said. "He says he's under the light. I need you up here." "On my way," Devon said, and I heard the truck start. And then he said the thing that I keep above all the rest of it, the thing I think about when I think about that summer. He said, "North Ridge, do not go outside. Do not open the door. Whatever you hear on that catwalk, you stay in the cab. You copy." "Copy," I said. And then, on the lookout channel, still open, still patient, the voice said, "You don't have to call anyone. I'm not coming in. I never come in. I just watch the ridge." A pause. Somebody has to. The last one stopped watching. That's how it gets you. You stop watching the ridge and you start watching the box, and then you're no good to anybody." I didn't answer it. I stood in the center of the lit cab, away from all four walls, and I watched the glass door at the top of the stairs, and I waited for Devon's headlights to come up the access road 4 miles down. They took 18 minutes. I counted most of them, and in those 18 minutes, the voice talked, low and steady and almost kind. And I'm not going to repeat all of it, but I'll tell you it never threatened me once. That was the worst part. It wasn't menacing. It was instructive. It kept telling me how to do the job. It told me to sweep clockwise. It told me the southeast drainage was where the fires always started, because of the way the afternoon wind came up the slope. It told me not to trust the firefinder's distance reading after rain because the brass swelled. It told me the things a lookout learns in a season, except it said it the way you'd say it if you'd learned them over many, many seasons, and then it said, "I learned all that the hard way. You don't have to. I'll tell you. That's why I check on you." Somebody answered me once, toward the end. I wish I'd kept answering back. And the lamp was on, and I was lit up in the glass box for the whole mountain to see, and somewhere under the light, on the catwalk, 8 feet away and 1 floor down, something was speaking to me with the patience of a thing that had a great deal of time. I never heard footsteps on the stairs. I want to be clear about that, because I know how this would land better if I told you I heard the stairs creaking, 1 tread at a time, coming up. I didn't. I heard nothing on the stairs at all. The voice came from the radio, only ever from the radio, the whole time. Under the light, lower than you, on my catwalk, and never one sound from the catwalk itself. Just the calm voice on the channel and the long wait for the headlights. Devon's truck came up the last switchback at 1926 and put its high beams on the base of the tower and the bald rock all around it, and I have never seen anything as beautiful as that flat white ordinary light hitting that empty rock, because it was empty. There was nobody on the catwalk, nobody on the stairs, nobody on the spine of the mountain in any direction the headlights reached, and Devon swept them everywhere, and then he came up the stairs 2 at a time and through the glass door, and the radio in his hand and mine were both still open on the lookout channel, and the channel was silent. Dead silent. The voice had stopped the moment the headlights hit the rock, and it did not come back. We searched. Of course we searched. Devon and I went over every inch of that catwalk with flashlights, the stairs, the timber legs, the rock for 50 yards in every direction. There was nothing. No footprints, but it was bare rock. You wouldn't expect footprints. No sign anyone had been there. No dropped handset, no radio, no warmth, no nothing. Devon stayed the night, slept across the doorway, and the radio sat there on the table on the open channel and never made another sound until Carol's voice at 0800, rasping and ordinary and 40 miles east, and I about wept to hear it. They pulled me off North Ridge the next day. I didn't argue. I finished the season on a closer station, a friendly one with hikers and chatter, and I never worked a deep posting again, and the voice never found me there or anywhere else. I'd like to end it there. A bad night on a lonely mountain, a trespasser with a radio who slipped away before the truck came, a season that ended early. I'd like that to be the end of it. But I went looking, later, that winter, in the district records, because of one thing the voice had said. The last one stopped watching. It had said the last one, and North Ridge had been vacant the year before every lookout in the district had told Carol they thought the box was empty. I wanted to know who the last one was. The last person to work North Ridge before me, the one before the vacant year. It took some asking. The records office wasn't eager, but I found it, finally, in an old roster and then in a newspaper archive from the small town at the foot of the district. And I'm going to tell you what I found, and then I'm going to stop, because there isn't anything after this that I can do anything with. The last lookout at North Ridge had worked it 2 seasons before mine. Alone, the deep posting, same as me. And at the end of his 2nd season he had not come down when he was supposed to. When the ranger went up to close the station for the winter, he found the cab clean and the logbook current and the radio on the table switched off. The lookout was at the bottom of the tower, on the rock, under the catwalk. They ruled it a fall. The stairs are steep and the ice comes early up there, and a man living alone for 4 months gets tired and careless, and that's almost certainly all it was. A fall, under the light. But there was one detail in the logbook that made it into the newspaper because the reporter thought it was poignant, a sad little human note from a man alone at the end of a long season. The last entry, the night before they think he fell, wasn't a weather reading. It was a sentence, and the sentence was, "Someone keeps answering my radio after dispatch signs off. I think I'll answer him back tonight." I don't tell this story to scare anybody off the work. It's good work, and the mountains need people who'll watch them. I tell it because of the one thing I can't put down. The thing that sits with me on the ordinary nights down here where the streetlights never go out. The voice said somebody answered me once toward the end, and I wish I'd kept answering back. And I keep thinking about the new lookout they'll put on North Ridge eventually, in some season to come, alone in the glass box with the silence taking on its shape around them. And I keep thinking about the evening, 40 minutes after they've signed off with dispatch, and the channel has gone quiet, and they think the day's radio is finally done, when it will crackle one more time and a calm, flat voice will answer them with their own words and tell them their line is clear for the night, and whether they'll answer it back, and how many of us are out there now, on the channel, lower than the light, waiting for the official voice to leave so we can have the line to ourselves. Just checking on the next one, just making sure somebody's still watching the ridge. What I changed. I rewrote the first strange radio incident so the title is now literally true. The narrator completes a full normal sign-off with Carol, lines clear for the night, believes the channel is closed, and then, 40 minutes later, the unknown male voice answers him by repeating his own sign-off phrase back. Copy North Ridge, lines clear for the night. The wrongness now comes from the voice answering a closed conversation rather than hailing him first. I reworked the narrator's realization so the impossible detail is specific and grounded. Dispatch never answers a sign-off. There's nothing to answer. And the voice only ever speaks after the official channel goes quiet, as if it had been listening and waiting for Carol to leave. I adjusted the second incident and the morning conversation with Carol to match the new logic. Carol's line, "Nobody answers a sign-off, there's nothing to answer," reinforces the title fit, and the narrator's suspicion now centers on the voice answering rather than initiating. I changed the narrator's flush him out night and the standby/ranger night, so each begins with him signing off with Carol first, keeping the after sign-off pattern consistent throughout. I threaded the answering motif into the key callbacks. The entity's line is now, "Somebody answered me once." I wish I'd kept answering back. The previous lookout's logbook entry now reads, "Someone keeps answering my radio after dispatch signs off. I think I'll answer him back tonight." And the final cyclical passage now ends on the image of the voice answering the next lookout with their own words after the channel has gone quiet. I left all the strongest scenes essentially untouched. The silence having a shape. "I can see your light on." The lamp scene. "There you go. Better in the dark, isn't it?" "I'm not in a tower. I'm lower than you. I'm under the light." Devon's truck and his warning, the search, and the logbook reveal.